cameras right now. Nicole, can I please ask you to begin the recording? Thank you very much. So we began the recording now, I guess.
The recording is started.
Fantastic. So welcome to the first Conversation seminar this year. Today's seminar is dedicated to artificial intelligence creating art. As usual, we invited two speakers to approach this topic from their perspectives. So each of our speakers will give a talk, and after that, we'll have a discussion. And during the discussion, everyone will have a chance to ask a question or leave a comment. And our first speaker today is Dr. Boris Orekhov. Boris has a PhD in literature. He's a researcher at the Lab of Digital Research Methods in Literature and Folklore at the Institute of Russian Literature, Pushkinsky Dom. His research interests involve corpus linguistics, digital humanities, artificial intelligence, poetry, and history of poetry. Boris authored several works on Bashkir poetry. He also took part in creating the Raniro corpus, consisting of Norwegian and Russian literary texts. Boris, thank you very much for accepting our invitation. We are delighted to host you. Please feel free to share your slides and begin your talk when you're ready.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. So here are my slides. So this topic, artificial intelligence and creativity really interests me. I think of myself as a scientist, but I once applied my knowledge of artificial intelligence to a project called NeuroBashkort. It's an art project designed to promote Bashkir culture. The Bashkirs are a minority nation living in Russia between the Volga and the Urals. So what do we usually hear from people who are out of touch? When we start talking about computer-generated texts, we are told it was already invented 30, 50, 100 years ago. Indeed, people invented a long time ago how machines would compose texts instead of them. For example, Ramon Lull invented the text-generated machine in the 12th century. Jonathan Swift describes a text-generating machine in his novel in the 18th century. There is evidence of an Englishman called John Clarke, who created a machine to generate hexameters in Latin in the mid-19th century, so 1845, if to be correct. Perhaps the enormous success of the ChatGPT will change something in people's opinion on the subject, but so far my personal experience of talking and reading about artificial intelligence text generation is that nothing new has happened in this area in last 100 or 200 years. But it's wrong. It happened. Neural networks have completely changed the game in the text generation. That is why both the method and the result are now unlike what we were 20 years ago, what they were 20 years ago. The machine-aided generation of poetry began soon after the first computers saw the light of the day in the 1940s. Only a decade later, the novel devices were used for poetic purposes. In 1959, German computer scientist Theo Lutz had a computer Zeus Z22 randomly combine words from Franz Kafka's unfinished novel The Castle. Generating poetry attracted a number of artists, among them Brian Gysin. In 1960, Gysin used a program to swap words randomly in the biblical phrase, I am that I am. It was a machine-based enhancement of the cut-up technique, which reaches back to Dadaism at least. Before the use of computers, text written on a paper was cut into pieces and mixed in a hat. Now the computer brought an element of technical mysticism into the process. In 1961, Nanni Balestrini created the poem Tape Mark I on the IBM 7070 computer, which was composed of parts of other works, namely Hiroshima Diary and so on. Here is the English translation. In the same year, another German computer scientist, Roel Gunzenhauser, published his Christmas poem. Gunzenhauser chose 10 nouns and adjectives of the Christmas theme, of which the computer composed a poem in accordance with a program that takes into account the grammar of the language. The result is a readable text in grammatically correct German. These first experiments were followed by many more attempts, which, however, only followed the already established principles of the pioneering works. In these first systems, two basic ways of generating text emerged. First, the recombination of words or phrases of already existing texts, for example, Geissen and Balestrini. Second, random words chosen from a dictionary with language and or verse restrictions set by the programmer, for example, Lutz and Gunzenhauser. The category of randomness becomes the main in this process, recognized by the pioneers of computer poetry as a key aesthetic factor, the randomness. One of the artists of the era, Mark Adrian, states this directly. For me, the neutrality of the machine is very important, he said. It makes it much easier for the reader to find their own meanings associated with words, since their choice, size, and composition are randomness. The desire to add randomness to the creative process seems to owe itself to the same reasons that at the beginning of the 20th century drove the surrealists and dadaists to suppress mind control for the certain creative acts. However, what is raised to an artistic principle here is actually a non-trivial technical problem for the computer. It is extremely difficult to find sources for truly random values. To maintain terminology accuracy, corresponding functions should rather be called pseudo-randomness. Pseudo-randomness, but not randomness itself, because there is no randomness inside the computer. As for artificial intelligence in text generation, for the moment, now in 2023, we can see a machine learning approach. Artificial neural networks are a machine learning technique. Among other things, they can overcome the limitations of traditional rule-based programming, where the programmer had to describe rules for every possible event and dictate how exactly the computer should react. For example, in the case of a chatbot, there should have to be a prepared reply pattern for any potential input by the user, just like in the early days of the development of dialogue systems. The problem, of course, is that the number of potential statements that can be formulated in natural language tends towards infinity. So that is impossible. That is impossible to take into account the whole variety of possible questions and answers. Machine learning works like this. The computer reads many texts, which are called training data, And based on these data, a language model is built that takes into account the probability of words following each other in real text. This model is what generates the new texts. All this means that there is no idea of randomness. There is no concept of randomness at all in text generation with neural networks. Recall that randomness was the main concept. Randomness was the main concept of computer poetry before neural networks, both in the 12th century and in the 19th century. Words from a given set were randomly combined with each other, and that was the main thing there. Neural networks create something like an arithmetic mean from training data. Let's see some example. A case from a modern Russian poetry. Text generated on the basis of relatively small corpus of single author. The works of Natalia Azarova, a modern Russian poet, born in 1956. There is a typo on the slide. So the works of Natalia Azarova will serve as an example. The training corpus comprised something like 200,000 characters. It was like 10,000 lines of verse. It was fed into a 3-layer neural network with architect of LSTM with 1,000 neurons. Before we apply the model, let us quote one of Azarova's original poems to set the stage. So this is the original poem in Russian, and this is the translation into English. Based on the training of the entire corpus, the neural networks has spawned the following two poems that I will give you with these slides. The first generated poem. So I marked the interesting places in it, but I will switch to an English translation so you can see what it looks like in English. So here is the first poem in translation, so I think I must read it in Russian for you to hear the basic style features in it. Могу не озеро горизонта, синих глубок луг на бахле настаю, болтлись, слежу ночи кораллов, гадаю облаками, с анимальной луна. So the words with the asterisks are actually non-words in Russian. So that's why they marked with it. But the main thing here is this bold text. So this is the translation. So it comes with no sense, but this is not the case. The thing is the stylistic features here. So let me show you the next poem, the second generated poem. А вот это их раз, день страницы за, не открывай сознаний. Yeah, a rough translation is here, and so the structure of the poem is rather similar to original Natalia Azarov's poems, because she usually used these graphical features and effects and so on. So these dashes are very likely to her original poems. At first glance, the text generated here seems authentic, to Natalia Azarova because they do not tell of any events, but present a number of lyrical motifs, which in modern poetry can, of course, be expressed in violation of grammar, and this is the case of Natalia Azarova. It is worth mentioning that correctly rendered words, lake, corals, moon, are peculiar to the poetics of Azarova. Moreover, the neural networks seems to have authentically modeled the distribution of letters, creating sound effects characteristics of Natalia Azarova's verses. So these sound effects, I mean, is озеро горизонта, глубокий луг, and нза сознаний. Recurring sounds complexes are printed in bold here. Even some secondary things like hyphens within a line and signatures after the texts were reproduced, like this Yalta 19th of September. So this is the stylistic feature of the original poems, and it is represented in the generated poem. Azarova did not write these texts, but she could have written them. They remind us of her poetics. The poetic texts generated by the neural net are also no means accidental. They consist so neural networks consistently cosplay the original of which on which they were trained, the original on which they were trained. Thanks to ChatGPT, this is no longer in use. People are slowly beginning to learn about it, but the main thing is that there was nothing like this in computer poetry 20 or 50 years ago. Randomness has been eliminated from the workflow of computer poetry, and the main concept has become similarity to the original, to the training data. As another example, I will show you this publication. Last year, my co-author and I published a text written by a neural network trained on the Russian novels of Vladimir Nabokov. And here is a text of a kind new Vladimir Nabokov's short story called Ghost. And this is the reality of a new world, world with neural networks. Nothing random here, only a cosplay. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Boris, for your presentation. I am sure this has generated a lot of questions, but before opening up to the question session, I'm very happy to introduce our second speaker today, who is Dr. Derya Soydaner, who is a postdoc at the Department of Brain and Cognition at University of Leuven and a member of the Leuven Institute for Artificial Intelligence. Dr. Soydaner is a statistician and a machine learning researcher interested in the development of novel deep learning architectures and algorithms. Her research focuses on image processing in supervised, unsupervised, and semi-supervised learning settings, and she has applied neural network techniques to different research fields, including human visual attention, inspired systems, and nuclear physics. She's highly interested in interdisciplinary research, and she's currently working in the area of computational aesthetics to provide deeper insight into the different roles that low, mid, and high-level visual indeterminate aesthetic preferences. Dr. Soydaner, thank you very much for joining us today, and please feel free to share the slides, and the floor is yours.
Thank you, Nicole. I'm sharing my slides quickly. Yes, can you see my slides now? Good.
Yes, thank you.
Great. Thank you for inviting me at first. Today I will talk about AI creating art in general. Oops, sorry, my slides do not move. Interesting. Ah, yes, it's okay. Now, on this slide, you see the winner of the digital art category at the Colorado State Fair's annual art competition last year. This artwork is really famous. Maybe you have seen it before. And the winner was Jason Allen and Midjourney. As you know, that Midjourney is an AI-based tool which creates images from textual descriptions, similar to DALL-E, Stable Diffusion, and so on. Nowadays, we hear so much about these text-to-image models or tools, we can say. But according to the New York Times, my slides do not move. Just a minute, please. I'm sorry.
No worries. Please take your time.
All right. Now I think you see the New York Times. Yes. Sorry. According to the New York Times, some artists accused him of cheating because Jason has used AI to create his artwork. But Jason said he won and he didn't break any rules. And he defended himself by clarifying that he submitted this artwork under the name Jason Allen via Midjourney. Now let's see another case. I guess, yes. In this case, it seems somebody asked ChatGPT to write a song in the style of Nick Cave. Now you see the chorus written by ChatGPT on this slide. And according to The Guardian, Nick Cave himself says this song sucks. And he is right, it's a really bad song. If you are curious about the rest of the song, you can find the lyrics on the internet, but personally, I do not recommend doing this. In spite of ChatGPT failures like this, it has become extremely popular. ChatGPT took only 5 days to reach 1 million users. In this graph, you see a comparison between some big companies. For example, Netflix took 3.5 years or Twitter took 2 years, but it took just 5 days for ChatGPT. So these advances bring so many questions, such as, is this real AI? Or what is AI? Are they intelligent? How do we define intelligence? How does it work? Is AI creative? What about ethical issues and what is the purpose? And the main question, what is next? I have many things to say about these questions, but I will try to explain them briefly because we have limited time here. First, let's clarify this. Today, when we talk about text-to-image models like Midjourney or large language models like ChatGPT, we say AI-based tools, but actually we mean deep learning, a subfield of machine learning and AI in general. Machine learning is a part of AI and it includes methods that have the ability to learn from data, and neural network is one of them. Deep learning is all about neural networks. It includes deep neural networks such as convolutional nets, generative adversarial networks, recurrent ones, transformers, and so on. Today, we develop neural networks for specific tasks. For example, ChatGPT is a neural network, and it's all about natural language processing. Or we develop a convolutional network, for example, to classify natural images. But overall, when we say AI or real AI, I imagine a single model that can do everything, such as understanding natural language or perceiving the visual scenes around. And it must be very difficult to differentiate this model from humans. Today, we are still far from this dream, but we have made a very good progress. I find ChatGPT and other AI-based tools fascinating, but there are still lots of things to do. Now let's talk more about neural networks. As I mentioned in the previous slide, there are different kinds of neural networks. Now I'm not going to explain all of them, of course, but I will explain the general idea and working mechanism for all of them. In its simplest form, a neural network takes some data as input and it learns to generate the desired output. The input and output may be in different forms based on the task. And the task can be image classification, question answering, image generation, machine translation, and so on. This is a long list, but as we focus on text-to-image models and large language models in this talk, let's limit ourselves for two different kinds of input, images and texts. The meaning of these inputs differs between humans and machines. In the simplest case, for example, when we look at a painting, we feel and think many different things. The same thing happens to us when we read a very good story, for example. But for a machine, a painting is just a bunch of pixels. Or the words in language must be converted into vectors and numbers. Let's keep this in mind. A neural network learns to generate the desired output. The learning is the key here. It makes the neural network a part of AI. During learning, a neural network takes huge amounts of data as input and updates its parameters by learning from its errors. So, a neural network learns from its own mistakes, which is also a similarity between neural networks and humans. A neural network extracts patterns from large data sets, and this leads to generalization. One last technical detail about neural networks is the data that neural network takes during learning is called training data. After learning is completed, we show the neural network test data which the neural network has not seen before. If it can generalize on test data well, we say it learns the given task. As a result, a neural network learns what you teach. Let's see an example. In 2016, Microsoft launched Tay, a chatbot designed to develop conversational understanding by interacting humans. Users could follow and interact with the chatbot on Twitter, and it will tweet back, learning as it went from other users' posts. Here, the aim was improving the chatbot. Tweets from others were data, and learning continued. So the intention was good. However, Microsoft had to shut Tay down because the chatbot turned into a rude and racist profile in just 24 hours. The reason was people provided horrible data. Now I will show you some examples, and I'm sorry for showing them because they are offensive. But these examples are striking and they show the importance of data. Now you see 3 tweets from Tay. These tweets show that the chatbot hates everybody and performing a terrible personality. An interesting tweet here is a person told Tay is a stupid machine. Tay's answer is still rude, but this time it's also interesting because it says, I learn from the best, I learn from you, and you are dumb too. So again, a neural network learns what you teach. But today we have another chatbot, ChatGPT. It is polite, it admits its own mistakes, and rejects inappropriate requests. Of course, OpenAI didn't develop ChatGPT in all of a sudden. It has been a process. First, they released GPT in 2018, next year GPT-2, and in 2020 GPT-3. During this process, at first, they increased the training data and also the number of parameters of the model. GPT-3 achieved a very good performance. For example, here, it could generate news article that humans had great difficulty distinguishing from a human-written article. But it was still not so successful because, for example, it also generated news article that humans found easy to distinguish from a human-written article. And finally, last year, they released Instruct GPT. For Instruct GPT, they followed a different training strategy and they could improve the results even though they use less parameters than the other 3. OpenAI says ChatGPT is a sibling model to Instruct GPT, which is trained to follow an instructions in a prompt and provide a detailed response. Now let's see their strategy. It's based on reinforcement learning from human feedback. Basically, there is a different data collection setup for ChatGPT. Human AI trainers provided conversations in which they played both sides, the user and an AI assistant. And then they mixed this new dialogue dataset with the Instruct GPT dataset. Then they randomly selected a model-written message, sampled several alternative completions, and had AI trainers rank them. And in the last step, this data is used to train a reward model. By using rewards, the model updates itself. But now let's forget the technical details now. Overall, they hired people to label toxic data. According to Time, OpenAI hired workers from Kenya and paid less than $2 per hour to make ChatGPT less toxic. Also in the news, Time used an illustration generated by DALL-E 2 to draw attention to the power of OpenAI's technology. Honestly, yes, money matters, of course, but here we have a serious situation. To prepare data, these workers detected toxic content every day. According to the news, this content includes situations in graphic detail like child sexual abuse, bestiality, murder, suicide, torture, self-harm, and incest. This kind of work is definitely not suitable for anyone, and I do not find it ethical. In terms of ethics, today we usually talk about what should we do with these AI-based tools as users. However, we should also talk about ethics for the developers. Let's also talk about ethics for text-to-image models. I guess Midjourney and DALL-E 2 are really popular, but there are more. There are transformer-based text-to-image models such as DALL-E, Cogview, Make a Scene, Party, and Muse. Also, there are diffusion-based text-to-image models such as DALL-E 2, Glide, Imagen, Stable Diffusion, and Instruct Pix2Pix. Basically, all of them can create realistic images from a description in natural language. Here on the right, you see an example generated by Stable Diffusion. And some of these text-to-image models have additional capabilities such as outpainting. Here you see new versions of Mona Lisa and the girl with a pearl earring generated by DALL-E 2. I find these AI-generated images fascinating, but I know there are some people, especially artists, who do not like these AI-based tools. In my opinion, if you don't like them, first, you don't have to use them. But I see them as a new kind of art, and to avoid confusion, maybe they can be classified in a different category. Also, I see text-to-image models as a source of inspiration and also a challenge to make humans more creative. Now let's talk about things you can do with ChatGPT. Actually, there are many things to do. For example, code debugging. Write and fix codes explaining why it's wrong and how it is fixed. I have tried this and it works for basic codes, but when the code gets complicated, ChatGPT performs worse. But still you can use it for understanding any code and fixing the bugs. It may be helpful. Also, you can ask ChatGPT to explain topics easily or write social media posts, email templates, shopping lists, cover letters, greeting cards, anything can be asked to ChatGPT. In short, I suggest using ChatGPT as a personal assistant and save time. Should we completely trust ChatGPT? The answer is no. In general, when you search for information on the internet, you are presented with numerous results and must determine which sources to trust, right? The same applies to ChatGPT. You should always verify the results generated by the chatbot. Also, when I asked ChatGPT the same question, it said no. ChatGPT says, it's always a good idea to verify the information I provide and to use your own judgment and critical thinking skills to evaluate the accuracy and relevance of my responses. Ultimately, the responsibility for making decisions based on the information I provide rests with you, the user. Also, OpenAI describes some limitations, and one of them is the limited knowledge of world and events after 2021. Because ChatGPT's training data only extends up until that year. We always talk about ChatGPT, but it's not the only language model. For example, DeepMind has developed Sparrow, or Meta has just released Llama, and there are more. So it has been an active research area. Please do not limit yourselves with ChatGPT. And of course, ChatGPT is not perfect. For example, it's not good at logical reasoning, or it's sometimes bad at solving math problems. The text that ChatGPT generates is convincing, but sometimes wrong. So again, please double check the results ChatGPT generates. And also, if you are interested in, you can find more failures in this GitHub page. So in summary, OpenAI has released ChatGPT as a chatbot. So the only aim is having a conversation. The goal is just putting words together in a meaningful way. That's it. Also, OpenAI says they launched ChatGPT as a research preview so they could learn more about the system's strengths and weaknesses and gather user feedback to help them improve the limitations. But we want ChatGPT to solve equations, write scripts or lyrics, or we ask for medical advices. So we want ChatGPT to be a mathematician, a teacher, doctor, philosopher, writer, or scriptwriter, so many things, even though OpenAI has no such claims. So is this realistic? Does any human like this exist? Do you know a single person who can do all these things? If you ask me to write a song in the style of Nick Cave, I'm sure I cannot perform better than ChatGPT. So why we expect ChatGPT can do everything and then we criticize? Instead of complaining, criticizing, or making fun of these smart tools, first let's accept that AI is a part of our daily lives today. Then let's use criticism in a positive way. It's still work in progress, so it's normal to see mistakes, failures, or funny things. Let's continue this progress. Today and in the future, I see these AI-based models as smart tools. I believe the best strategy is human-machine collaboration. Let's use them to improve our life qualities. And of course, we should use them for good, and we should use them safely and responsibly. I would like to end my talk with a quote from Alan Turing. He says, if a machine is expected to be infallible, it cannot also be intelligent. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Derya, for such a rich presentation. So it is now time for a discussion. But first, I give an opportunity to our speakers. If you want to comment on each other's presentations, or if you have questions, you are privileged to ask them first. I also have mine, but I'll wait. And also to the public, if you have a question or a comment, either please raise your virtual hand or write your question in the chat and I'll invite you.
Well, maybe I can ask a question to Boris.
Yeah, sorry, just could you please stop sharing the screen so we can see you all, like.
Sorry, I forgot.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Boris, your talk was really good, actually. Honestly, I thought about a question to ask you this morning, and I couldn't find a question to a person who has a PhD in literature. So I asked ChatGPT. I described this situation to ChatGPT in summary, and I wanted ChatGPT to suggest me some questions. And here is a question from ChatGPT to Boris. It says, many people argue that AI-generated art is simply a reflection of the biases and preferences of its creators, rather than true artistic expression. What is your perspective on this issue?
So the best way is to give ChatGPT possibility to answer this question, I think. But as for the, I don't think that artistic features and personal preferences are opposite to each other. I think that this is the same thing, actually, because the history of art includes their personalities, yes, and their own way of thinking, of creating, and I think that this is not the opposite thing. This is the same. And as for my comment, I really thank you for this presentation. So it was better to put you to the first position in this seminar because you explained many things that I was not able to comment. Yes, and so I wanted to say that ChatGPT is not model, is not a language model, but a language model with some filters of inputs. Yes, and of course this answer about whether we can trust ChatGPT. I don't think that this is a computer-generated answer. I think that the creators, the OpenAI, put this as a pattern of an answer, because they predicted that many people would ask something like that, and so we can download and launch the models as ChatGPT. No, sorry, GPT, GPT-2, GPT. We can use it on our own machines, and we can see what they answer to for the inputs. As for ChatGPT, we can't do that, so we have no possibility to see what is inside this model. So I think that this answer, just like many other answers, are so kind of put in this system and filtered by the system. So this is my comment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Great. So if the speakers do not have any more comments or questions, I invite anyone in the audience to ask their question or maybe leave a comment. And in the meantime, I'm gonna use my privilege and ask a question I have. It's a bit a long one, but I'm gonna try to put it in a short way. So listening to you both, I now have an idea that AI can be used in art in two ways, in poetry, more specifically in text. First, to repair an artwork which was damaged, because AI is often used in visual art to do that. Say you have a partly destroyed or unfinished artwork, and AI can be used to repair it. So basically what Boris said, especially about the castle, because I was very frustrated that the castle ends so abruptly because Kafka didn't have a chance to end it. So does it mean that we can use it first to repair, in a way, an artwork, or maybe to create new poems by an author who died early, for example? But this is only one way of how we can use it, because another one is to create new artworks. And say if I am an artist who wants to use AI as a tool for my art, what kind of strategies can I apply? For example, Boris said about randomness and similarity. Similarity looks a lot like to help repair artworks, but randomness looks like something helping to create something new. So does it mean that we can use both, as like modern artists who wish to use AI to create new art? Can they kind of use both algorithms, randomness and similarity? And I kind of can ask a second question, that do you think, when you both told me how people are skeptical of artificial intelligence creating art, don't you think that it reminds of how Marcel Duchamp introduced his pissoir at the art exhibition, and everyone was so skeptical about it, like it's not art, but he insisted that this is art. And now we use everyday objects like cups and chairs in our galleries, and no one is skeptical about it. No one is arguing whether it's art or not. Do you think that AI is something similar to that? It's not that Duchamp was unable to produce a sculpture or paint a painting, but instead he used a ready-made. So does it mean that in this way, artists using AI are using them as a tool to create new art? That's it. Like, it's a question for both of you. So if you want to reply, I'll be very grateful. Thank you.
So yeah, can I start? Yeah, as for the strategy, I think that the best strategy is computer-aided creativity. So when the artists have some idea, and to use computer machines to assist him to make something quicker than he he did it by hands or something like that. And the strategy is also not very modern, because in 1970s, I think, there was a poet who used computers to finish some lines that he started, and so on. And as for the repairing of non-finished or corrupted piece of arts, we must remember that this finishing by artificial intelligence will not be interesting. It will not be creative, because it's just just a mean, not evil, but mean values. Yes, and so the most creative by artificial networks is the errors. So when the model make mistake, then it could create some kind of image. Yeah, and as for what is art and what is not the art, it's a sociological question. When someone gives such a remark, this is not an art. If this person is inside the area of creativity, that means by sociologists like Bourdieu, for example, French sociologist, then this person tries to get some resources. He wants to state his way of thinking about that, the right way. And when he says this is not the art, that means he some kind of fight with another group. This is the fight for the resources by the sociological point of view. That means that surrealists, Dadaists like Duchamp, they have won in this battle. So they state that this is an art was the winning strategy, nothing more. So this is not the case of computer and machine learning, neural networks, and artificial intelligence, to my mind. This is the case of social thinking about art.
Thank you very much. Derya, do you want to comment?
Yeah, I would like to say a few things. Now I see the point from a more computer science point of view. So repairing a damaged artwork, we can use AI for repairing a damaged artwork, or we can use AI for creating new artworks from my point of view, because these are new tools and you still use your creativity. You don't use a paintbrush or other traditional tools maybe, but you still use your creativity. First, you start with your own thoughts. You imagine the artwork and you start creating the artwork with AI. So I think it's still creativity. And now, yes, today people are skeptical about AI-based artworks, and some of them doesn't accept that they are artworks. But Marina, your example was really good. I think in time people will get used to AI-based images more and more.
Yes, thank you very much. I guess this also reminds us that we don't have one final definition of what art is because it's constantly developing. Yeah. Okay, thank you very much. And now we have a question from Teresa. Teresa, do you want to ask your question? Oh, I'm sorry, you're muted. We can't hear you.
Sorry. I actually have two questions. The first one is, don't you think that with the text-to-image generation, AI art soon will also just get a little bit of a moosh, because more and more pictures are going to be generated by AI art that are then used to feed into AI art. And so basically there's just going to be a moosh of AI art at some point, and rather than a continuously development, if we don't, for example, start to really weight the data sets that we give the AIs to do this text generation, because if we just give them the internet, then this, in my opinion, could soon lead to like a lot of like smooshed art. That is because there's so much more AI generated art than a group of artists can create in like such a short amount of time. And that's my first one, also to both of you. And then my second one is maybe a little bit more to Derya Soydaner, which is how do you think we can address or make as people companies like OpenAI really make sure to, first of all, better pay the workers that they use to train their AIs, and secondly, maybe actually take the consequences that we, mainly the Western world, uses this. So we probably also should rate them here and not have the rating outsourced somewhere where most people probably don't even have an easy access to internet. And how do you feel like we could face this challenge? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Boris, do you want to begin replying?
I was the first at the first time, so maybe
Okay.
we will change.
Okay, maybe I can start from the second one. Both questions are really long, but as far as I understand, yes, the companies like OpenAI, there are some ethical issues I mentioned in my presentation. So there should be some new regulations, and the training data is important for neural networks, and I understand that they need data, but these companies, not just OpenAI, the companies in general, should find a solution in a more in a better way. I mean, we shouldn't forget our humanity while creating new machines, right? Yeah, well, what was the question actually?
How we may be able to actually face this challenge and make these companies change something. Because if we just mention it in a Times article and then everyone continues to use ChatGPT, then I feel they're going to do something to polish it, but I don't think really that this will stop companies of doing so. And do you think this is something that should be on a government level and has to be controlled from a government level? How do you then deal with the fact that it won't only would work for a certain nation, and then maybe ChatGPT or like OpenAI would just be like, okay, well then we're not in Austria anymore or in Germany or wherever the regulation is. So I think, do you have somehow an idea how we can really make these companies be more human?
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah, I see. I have the same concerns, and I'm not an expert in laws, but maybe it should be in government level. I don't know. Or maybe we can use the power of social media. We can mention more and more about those workers, what happened in Kenya and the other cases. So the power of social media is important. And also I know that there are some experts in laws, they work on AI ethics. So maybe they can do something and with a collaboration with government, of course. But it's a must. Thank you. Thank you for this beautiful question.
Why do you think these companies not controlled by government? Yet.
Yet, or we don't know actually.
Yes, this is the answer.
Yeah, it's beyond the science.
Thank you very much.
Thank you both for the talks also. They were really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you. Nicole, do you have a question? We can't see you actually, or it's just me. I can only see a black screen.
Let me see. I just turned on and off my camera. Can you see me again?
Not yet.
Can you hear me okay though?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I was thank you both for your comments and the very interesting presentations. I think I was interested in the concept that Boris put forward of the fact that randomness is lost in the recent development of AI, and I wonder if perhaps if this is part of creativity and kind of creating associations. I really like the concept of kind of empowering the reader to create its own meaning. And I wonder what is the substantial difference between this creating randomness and replicating patterns, and if kind of something new can be really generated with AI, or if it's just something that indeed replicates something that is existing. And therefore, perhaps that is the way in which we can understand the limitations of this tool, but also, I think, as Derya was suggesting, this tool could also be elements to be more creative. But yes, the question is how is this really? I guess, Derya, do you agree that the randomness is lost in the recent development of AIs? And what would be the difference in kind of recreating randomness and replicating patterns?
Maybe by saying randomness, we do not understand the same things, but in my point of view, we don't lose randomness, because these neural networks do not memorize data. I know there is a huge amount of data, the whole internet, you can imagine like that, but they don't memorize it. They learn patterns, and then in the end, when they learn the task, they generate new things. So for me, the randomness is still there. No? Boris disagrees.
I thought this was going to be a controversial question, so I would like to have both your points of view.
So please explain more.
Yeah, you're totally right. So we understand randomness in a different way. When I say randomness, I mean the randomness for the reader. And when you say randomness, you mean the randomness for an engineer. Because when reader sees text, he doesn't know whether some kind of random functions are inside the system, yes, and he can see only the result, and the result is a random recombination of words, some kind of permutation. And this is what the artists seeking in this way of creating in the second part of the 20th century. So the randomness for them wasn't something kind of making any sense, controversial. They wanted the randomness because the randomness was the way of abandon the ratio, the mind control. That's why surrealistic and Dadaistic experiments are what we mention here today. Me and Marina mentioned Dadaists. And as for randomness as a function inside the system that launches model, it's not a concept here. It's just a secondary technique detail, nothing more. And when you reproduce something, for example, the style of some artist, the concept of randomness is not here. The main concept here is to reproduce, is to be similar to something. And when you similar to something, this is not randomness. It's the certain thing. That's what I mean. So you totally caught the difference of ways of thinking about randomness. Thank you.
Okay, now I understand. Thank you, Boris. So, for example, an AI tool when an AI tool generates a painting in the style of Van Gogh, there is no randomness. Okay.
Wait, just Nicole is having some difficulties with her connection, but when she's getting back, she's gonna ask some more questions. Nicole, are you here?
I can see Nicole and I can hear Nicole.
Yeah. Yeah, for some reason, while you were replying to this last, I lost a couple of sentences, but that's okay. I heard enough that about the differentiation between randomness and patterns generating. I guess the follow-up question was because AI is so good in replicating patterns that kind of mimic the style of certain authors. Perhaps that could be something that we could use as a tool, not so much to create art, but perhaps to study it. So in a way, this could be, I mean, the kind of text generated by AI could be used to replicate as well as perhaps change some important stylistic elements of a text, and understand which are the elements that actually make us really enjoy art, and perhaps give us more kind of objective control on the way we generate new stimuli. So I wonder if Boris, to have your perspective, how much this would be perhaps relevant and useful from your point of view and from your discipline, and and perhaps having Derya's perspective on what she thinks in terms of how well we can control generating new text, and if actually the choices that we ask AI to make when manipulating certain stylistic elements will it be more reliable to, for example, an experimenter that is interested in studying poetry and he just has to make choices? So can we rely more on the machine to make these choices?
So I call it neural reading. Because we have distant reading for now, due to the book of Moretti, and I call it neural reading when we train a neural network on a corpus of texts, on a large corpus of texts, and then we generate a small piece, a small sample, and then we can explore these big corpus and as an extract, yes, and make a kind of close reading on this sample. That's not a real literature studies exploration, but I think this technique can give a literature explorer some insights on what he must pay attention to. Because maybe he didn't notice that in a corpus of, I don't know, English romanticism, there is a kind of stylistic feature that neural network pointed out. And to my mind, that's a real new technique. And it was completely unable to use it 20 years ago. Because that era, we have only a recombination of words that couldn't replicate any stylistic features. And now, thanks to neural networks, we have such a technique. And I call it neural reading. Yes, we get it here. We get it now.
Yes, I really like neural reading technique. And for me, that would be nice to see a neural network, for example, that generates Kafka-style stories or novels. I love reading Kafka. And if people cannot understand it's written by a machine or Kafka, it's okay for me. And it may be helpful for students and researchers to study and understand Kafka, for example. Or here at KU Leuven now, we have been working on computational aesthetics. And basically in our experiments, we need human participants. But if we can develop a neural network, can predict the aesthetic ratings, then the other things in the human level, then ideally, after that, we don't need human participants and our experiments will be easier. So, yeah, why not?
Thank you. So it seems that we kind of reached an agreement that perhaps AI could help us make things easier and faster up to a certain extent. And I think this kind of, I have a follow-up question, but of course, if anyone else, I don't want to monopolize the conversation, but if anyone else wants to ask a question, please do. But I guess the implication of this is there are ethical implications in the way we use AI, and I think I really like how Derya referred to it in her talk. And you mentioned the article where Nick Cave commented the lyrics created by ChatGPT, and there's a quote from that article that I think it's really important, because Nick Cave says that, I understand that ChatGPT in its infancy is in its infancy, but perhaps that is the emerging horror of AI, and that we will forever be in its infancy, and will always be further to go, and the direction is always forward and always faster. And that kind of also has an implication on how we develop tools that could be used, that we can understand. They are tools, because I think if the aim, as Derya, you said, is not to differentiate between humans and machines, then I think we're very close, because the way that ChatGPT interacts with the user, it usually says, I apologize, I'm sorry, I believe, I think. So all these verbs do refer, we as user often just interpret this as there's a will behind the text that is produced. So yeah, I wonder this kind of constant further development and the issue of how we develop a tool that we actually can understand as humans and perceive as tool. I wonder what would be the direction further to use this in a more ethical way.
So I would say it's not a new question, because so the humanity has a large experience of so user experience of creating tools, and for example, when we can't reach some page on the internet, there is a human readable message for us in the browser, so you can't reach this page due to these reasons. Maybe you should reconnect internet or something else. And so this is not, I think, the new question. Yes, this refers to that line of creating tools with a huge amount of people involved in this area that called user experience and the patterns of creating tools. So I think this is not the new question; it's a kind of continuation of an existing of a profession.
Yes, as I said, it's still work in progress and it has been developing, and also the ethics, not the model itself. People also have been working on the ethics. And what's next? Hope ChatGPT will be better, because it's still not good. And for me, it's too kind. It always says my apologies, or I'm so sorry. I made a mistake, but is it too human-like? I don't think so. People are not so kind. And maybe in the next step, I imagine, as I told, my dream, I think everybody's dream is a combination of ChatGPT and also a speech model. So I just don't want text. I also want to talk. I also want to see. So a combination of everything, but it's still far from. We still have time.
So does it mean one day I can create my own Kafka who can talk with me?
That will be super cool.
Like that?
I'm not sure about that, because Kafka stories are rather, depressive.
Yes, but I love them.
Maybe it's not a good way to talk to Kafka every day. Maybe maybe once a week.
Kafka for everyone.
Thank you both for your reflections and the very interesting discussion. If there are no other questions from our audience, I would like to thank again our speakers today for your talk and for your contribution. And I'd just like to remind you that our next seminar will be the 22nd of March about literature and embodied predictive processing. Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to stop the recording now.